Hey guys, this is Urizi. Part 13 of What If Naruto Was the Son of Apollo. The summer after the quest for Artemis, Naruto has his hands full with guilt, concern and frustration. When Bianca's strange illness takes a turn for the worse, a quest is started. A relationship is strained, a hero returns, and the labyrinth is found. Join Naruto as he begins his quest for the cure and the others dive into the labyrinth. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and also check the author in the description if you liked the story. I don't want to make you wait any longer, so let's start. Chapter 18. I just killed someone. Talia thought as she looked at the body of the man she had killed. Oh my god, said Piper. Her cry grabbed Talia's attention. The young daughter of Aphrodite was losing her cool as her mind caught up with the situation. She had just seen someone die right in front of her and his blood was on her face. Frantically, she wiped at her face to get the blood off, tears starting to pour down her face as she did. Piper, stop, said Talia, grabbing the girl's wrists as she knelt down to comfort her. Easy, here, let me get it. The daughter of Aphrodite sniffed, trying to pull herself together as the older girl wiped away the blood. She looked back on what she had been through so far, Naruto falling to the hood of her father's SUV and the shooting that ensued, chasing after a draken, or whatever it was called, forced to wake up at crazy early hours because of some huge scandal. Then there was seeing Naruto's dad drive one of his descendants insane with a curse of prophetic proportions. And after that was flying from California to a hidden world in Antarctica. Now she's seen someone die right in front of her, and she really understood why ancient Greece and Rome was considered barbaric in modern society in terms of violence. Hey, Talia's voice snapped Piper from her thoughts. I got all the blood off. Thank you, Piper said quietly, sniffing her tears up. She looked up at the older girl. Does it ever get easier? Living with monsters after your life? Seeing people die? Camp Half-Blood does wonders for making that easier, said Talia, putting a hand on the younger girl's shoulder in reassurance. Like Camp Jupiter, but less militant. It really is a summer camp for demigods, though we act a small family sometimes. Though if you really wanted you could stay there all year. Really? Piper asked, weighing the options in her head. Yeah, Naruto and I stay there year-round, said Talia. There's actually a nice school I go to during the school months. Though I can skip occasionally, get some extra lessons in combat or practice my control over my father's domain. Talia. Piper. Jason's voice broke off their conversation as he ran towards them, Naruto's sword Eclipse and his own Julius in hand. Where's Naruto? Follow the fallen trees, said Talia, moving to check on his own scrapes. Are you alright? Yeah, nothing too serious, said Jason, ignoring the gash he had in his leg, though he did favor it as he walked. He pocketed his coin-disguised weapon and handed her Eclipse. Here, hold on to this. I think this is Naruto's sword. This doesn't look like how I remember it. And where's the shield? Talia asked with a frown as she took the blade. Jason shrugged it off and rushed past, going into the woods and searching for the older blonde since it was his quest to return Naruto back to the United States. Talia blinked, quickly following after her brother and Piper after her, all of them looking for the whiskered blonde. They found Naruto pinned by several trees, Jason using his spear in an attempt to wrench the tree off of him. Naruto, said Talia with worry written on her face, dropping Naruto's sword. She readied her own spear and climbed onto the opposite side of where Jason stood, jabbing her own spear into the gap. She and Jason pushed, getting the tree to jerk forward and making Naruto's eyes open with a loud gasp. Talia, stop. Stop, Jason said, catching Naruto's gasp and seeing him mutter something. She did, and Jason carefully shimmied to Naruto's side, leaving his spear wedged where it was. What did you say? Naruto? B branch, said Naruto, coughing up some of his blood and ichor. Jason looked down through the gap, where he could see the branch. It didn't look good, and that was with the dim lighting. Impaled, cut, branch, first. Alright, okay, hang in there, Naruto, said Jason. He looked at Talia. We need to cut the branch that impaled him before he drowns in his own blood. She went to push more, but he stopped her. Wait. Jeez. Look, if we push too much we risk opening the wound, but if we hold it where it is, Piper. Yes? The young demigoddess looked at him curiously. Think you can cut the branch away? Jason asked. Piper started at the question. See, cut the branch? Can you? Why, yes. Piper swallowed down her nerves in an effort to help the older blonde. This would help distract her from some of the things she was worried about. Yes, I can help. Okay, here, give me your hand, said Jason, carefully keeping the wedge open as he offered the girl his hand to help her onto the tree. Piper climbed up and easily balanced herself on the tree that Naruto was pinned to. Jason pointed down at the gap. Look closely, can you see the branch? Yeah, I see it, said Piper. She crouched down and prepared the knife Naruto's steed had given her. Reaching through the crack, her slender arms finally came in handy. Piper waited until her blade hit resistance. Looking at Naruto's face to assure herself she wasn't pressing against his body, she began to use her dagger like a saw, cutting away the tree. As it came to the last threads of being connected to the offending branch, the tree began tilting away and snapped just before Piper could finish it off. Jason and Talia quickly regained their balance after the fallen tree rolled away. Piper merely adjusted her kneeling posture before standing back up and dropping from the tree the three were perched on. Looking at the branch impaling the older blonde teen, Piper winced. Ouch! That has to hurt. The branch that had impaled Naruto was at least 6 inches wide, going right through the left of his stomach. Talia and Jason dropped to the ground, the Roman Grace kneeling at his older friend's side. He reached for the branch and tugged, gauging how long it was as he looked at the tree Naruto was still pinned to. Naruto awoke with a glob of his unique blood escaping his mouth, turning to weakly glare at the younger blonde. The fuck are you doing? Just seeing what else we have to work with, said Jason. Sorry. Naruto just gave him another dirty glare before his eyes drifted shut. He was low on blood, and without Kyubi to accelerate his Apollo-given qualities, he may very well pass out before he finishes healing. The three conscious and able demigods turned at the sound of rustling branches, the Grey siblings raising their weapons in the direction of the sound while Piper emotionally and mentally prepared herself to fight if necessary. Thankfully for them, it was only the Godame Hokage, Tsunade, bursting through the brush with several masked warriors behind her. What happened? She demanded, looking at the strangers with distrust and clenching her fists in preparation to retaliate if necessary. Naruto fought against that dick with the duck ass for a head, said Talia, her hand wrapping around her spear and tensing in preparation to defend the group. Then he got smacked around by the Two-Face wannabe. He's dead now. The older woman narrowed her eyes before looking at the steadily breathing blonde with the branch in his gut. She moved to his side and pressed her hand against the branch. Naruto's eyes shot open with a gasp. The fuck are you doing? He asked quickly at the appliance of pressure. Talia and Jason raised their spears at her, but by doing so both were surrounded by 3 of the masked men. Piper got an arm wrapped around her neck with a kunai aimed at her jaw, making her stiffen and tighten her grip around her own knife. Everyone relax. Tsunade ordered. The masked ANBU released the demigods at her order, the air thick with tension as Jason and Talia glared at the ones that threatened them. The leader of Konoha returned her gaze to the blonde. Is Sasuke dead? More slippery than Orochimaru, said Naruto after a cough of blood. Please stop touching the stick inside me. Stupid brat, stop talking already. Tsunade ordered as she began channeling medical chakra through her hand, coating her hand in a green energy that soon spread around the branch. Naruto's head jerked upwards as he released a strangled cry of pain, the foreign medical chakra having an adverse effect on the new chakra system he had. He felt like he was on fire, his natural healing thinking that the medical chakra was an assaulting virus. Tsunade ignored this, her medic training and expertise making her used to hearing such cries as she slowly pulled the branch out. By the time the whole branch, a good 8 inches long one, had been pulled out, Naruto has lost consciousness. We need to move quickly, said Tsunade as she pulled out a tag and unsealed a stretcher. She looked to a curiously familiar ANBU with a rather unique white hairstyle and another that gave off a feeling of nature that Talia had felt before from somewhere. Inu and Yamato, you two carry him while I work on the hole in his stomach. Nico, escort the kids back to the village. The rest of you secure the border. Let's go. When he awoke, Naruto felt a stinging sensation in his left hand and he sat up, before groaning in pain at the strain on his stomach. He looked to his left through a squinted eye, finding Shizen dipping his hand into a bowl of clear liquid that he immediately recoiled from. Ow! What the hell is that? Water with herbs, said Shizen, grabbing his wrist and forcing it back into the bowl. Naruto bit onto his lip and his other fist clenched tightly around the bar on his bed, his body tensing up as a jolt of pain shot up his left hand's arm and doubled around his waist. Apparently his hand hadn't fully healed and neither had the gaping hole in his stomach. This method of medical treatment was not doing him any favors. "Oh, you big baby. It's just to disinfect your burn. How did you get this anyway? Your friend was very vague about it compared to telling us you were run through with a tree. Where are they?" Naruto asked, giving the hospital window a longing glance. He very much hated this building. Not for the people, nor for what happened within here, but because how utterly dead it made you feel when you were inside it. Actually, he felt that way in every hospital. The irony did make him want to laugh, though. Here he was, son of the god of medicine, and he hated hospitals. That was his mother's opinion on them, too. White walls, white floors, white clothes, it's all so eerily dead, said Kushina as she fed him a small sliver of ambrosia. He had just finished his battle with Kyubi, making it agree to help him in his new life's work as Hades' children's protector. As he chewed the small sliver, he noted that it tasted just like Ichiraka beef ramen. The least they could do is add some color to it so it doesn't feel like you're quarantined from the rest of the world. And then there are the needles. And don't get me started on the smell. It's either that of sickness or sterilization. Ugh, yeah, his mom was not a fan of hospitals. Waiting for you to be released, said Shizun as she removed his hand from the painful remedy and started wrapping bandages around it. As soon as she finished, she moved the bowl to the side and stood from her seat. Now, Naruto, you and I both know you hate being in hospitals. Which stands for horrible, obnoxiously smelling place insistently trapping all locals. But you cannot escape this time. Shizun finished with a stern glare. We have ANBU set all around the ward and outside your door in case anything happens. And we've reinforced the windows with anti-chakra seals. Challenge accepted. I mean it, Naruto, said Shizun. You're recovering from detachment from your biju, impalement, nerve damage. Minor brain damage, blood loss, several fractured if not broken bones, and to top it off a major third-degree burn on my left hand, said Naruto as he cut the experienced medic off and glared at his bandaged hand. Physical recovery, 6 to 8 weeks for a normal human, for a demigod, 3 to 4. With ambrosia, 2. With ambrosia and nectar, 1 to 1.5. He clenched his bandaged fist, ignoring the pain he felt, and looked back at the surprised woman. For a child of Apollo, 5 days. For an Uzumaki, 4. For all the above, 2. At most. Shizun sighed and wrote something on her clipboard as she turned to walk away. As her hand touched the door handle, Shizun looked back at the bandaged blonde. Don't try to escape again, Naruto. Please. Well, if you're going to ask nicely, said Naruto with a sigh as he laid back. His hands wrapped around behind his head as he relaxed, careful to not put pressure on his bandaged palm. Might as well stick around. Meanwhile, Talia was looking at her boyfriend's new sword, wondering how it had changed, where the shield had gone and why it hadn't reverted back to a bracelet. She was sitting with Jason and Piper in the waiting room of the Konoha hospital. They had 4 of those ANBU agents watching them while they waited for Naruto to be allowed visitors. The 2 Gray siblings had bandages covering small cuts they received from their fight with Jugo. Jason even had a nice laceration on his leg from when Jugo threw him into the side of the cliff. And then every Friday there is a siege, which I mentioned before, said Jason as he finished describing Camp Jupiter's routine to the curious daughter of Aphrodite, who he kept incorrectly referring to as Venus. It's kind of like a war game. A few kids from every cohort is challenged to take the specially designed fort, so it's like an offensive and defensive capture, the flag only one-sided? Piper asked. Jason nodded. If that's the case, said Talia, who decided to speak up at hearing the analogy. You'd love our camp's capture the flag. It's both offensive and defensive for both sides. Jason looked interested at that, leaning forward to ask more when the dark-haired aide of the Hokage walked in. Shizun gave a small smile to the 3, and since they were looking out for Naruto, she considered them all right in her books. He's awake, now, she said. And he should still be in his hospital room. Why wouldn't he be there? Piper asked. Shizun gave her a tired smile. Naruto doesn't like hospitals. He finds them restraining and stupid. He spent a few weeks in here when was young. Reasons varied from a prank of his going wrong or after a few failed missions. Then there was the time he was hospitalized after he developed his first S-rank attack. It ripped the cells in his right hand apart, and had it not been for his furry guest, which I hope you are all aware of. Talia and Jason nodded while Piper's brows furrowed. He may not have kept that arm. Reckless idiot is what he is, said Talia, her arms crossing as she sat back in her seat with a frown, Eclipse resting on her lap. He is Konoha's #1 knucklehead ninja, said Shizune with a smile as she thought back about a younger, loud-mouthed, and stubborn Naruto. He was an Uzumaki through and through if what Tsunade's stories about Kushina were true, though with the occasional flair and seriousness that his father had. Said Talia, correcting the woman with a frown. Do you know why he resigned? Shizune asked the teenager, a hopeful gleam in her eye as she looked at the raven-haired girl. For the same reason, he said. I see, said Shizune. Her answer didn't appease Shizune's hope and made the woman sigh. She stood back up and held her clipboard to her chest. Well, I guess I should get back to Tsunade-sama. She's working on that vial Naruto gave her, should be done making a cure by tomorrow. If she isn't drinking, that is. She turned and walked away, leaving the three demigods to get to their feet and walk, or limp slightly in Jason's case, to Naruto's room. They warily watched the two masked men standing outside his room before opening the door. What they saw mildly surprised the Grace siblings and fully shocked Piper. 73, 74, 75, 76, 77. Naruto was counting as he balanced on his right hand upside down, hospital scrubs covering him from the waist down as he performed vertical push-ups. He had his bandaged left hand clenched tightly into a fist and pressed against his back, sweat already forming on his brow as he struggled to maintain balance, consistency, and fight against gravity. Whiskers, what the hell are you doing? Talia asked, her eyes wide as she watched him work out despite having just been put in the hospital. Though she wouldn't admit liking the view of his torso, even with the bandages wrapped around his midsection, it was a sight to admire. 79, 80, staying in shape, said Naruto with a grunt as he paused close in the air to lean back to the ground until his toes were touching the tile floor. As soon as they did, he started doing one-handed push-ups. Rebuilding lost muscle. Sasuke may have been weaker than me, but he could hold my sword back. In my old body, that wouldn't have happened. I would have shattered his sword instantly. Didn't you shatter it anyway? Talia asked. Besides the point, I should have shattered it with a swing, said Naruto with a grunt as he pushed himself against gravity. I'm only at 65% of my former physical strength, you know. 65? Jason asked. It's complicated. Point is, I used to be able to break boulders with a punch, said Naruto as he continued to do push-ups, keeping track in his head. He grunted as he hit 100 and with a small amount of strain, pushed back off the ground to resume vertical push-ups. Now I can only crack stone. Only? Piper asked, her mouth agape. You're upset about being only able to crack stone? He did just say he used to be able to crush boulders, said Jason pointedly. You were serious? Demigods can do many things, said Talia informatively. Jay and I can control to a minor extent our father's domain, and you've seen him fly. Whiskers grew up here, in a land outside of the Olympians' control. Something I still find hard to believe. The Olympians have rules, Talia-chan, said Naruto with a grunt. 108, 109. They're gods though, said Piper with a furrowed brow. I mean, I get that they would make rules, but having rules, divine rules, said Jason patiently. Jupiter. Zeus, said Talia, correcting her brother since Piper was Greek. Same difference, said Naruto, covering for his fellow blonde as he paused in his activity to look at them. Anyway, said Jason, a bit irked at being interrupted but keeping it to himself. The Olympians are kept in order by a set of rules that Jupiter or Zeus, whichever name you prefer. J. They aren't names, the gods have multiple personality disorder, said Naruto with a grunt. Romans and Greeks are two different things. Can I finish? Jason asked. Go right ahead. Jupiter set down divine rules in order to keep from the gods to cause too many natural disasters that could obliterate the mortals and the planet through their arguments. Which, by the way, is an incredible amount of foresight on his part. A good leader knows himself. No, a good leader accepts himself for who and what he is, faults included. Like me, for example, I'm an idiot, immature at times, secretive at others, but that's from my upbringing. I can hear you idiots laughing out there. Naruto's cry was directed to the two ANBUs stationed outside his door. Where was I? Telling us your faults, said Talia, an amused smile across her face. Right, Well, like I was saying, I train too much, act before I think at times, have short-term and unfinished plans. Don't give me that look, Talia-chan. I get bored easily and hate sitting still. I don't like vegetables or most healthy foods. I've had premarital sex, oof. The now scowling Talia cut off Naruto with a shove that resulted in him falling to the ground. Holding his aching ribs, he looked up through a squinted eye at his girlfriend. Did I mention I don't think before I act? It's not an excuse. Just saying. Naruto rolled with a groan and got to his feet. And to top it off, I'm stubborn. Stubborn enough to match Raijiji in a staring contest just to say I did. Probably wouldn't survive afterwards, though. He grinned like a fox. I play to win, by any means necessary. How would you beat him? Talia asked out of genuine curiosity. Poke him in the eye, said Naruto. Duh. He sat on the bed, rubbing his sore and bandaged side with his intact hand. Looking closely, one could see a light glow as he attempted to get a read on how long he'll still be in the hospital. He grumbled when he finished and took notice of the sword in Talia's hand. Oh, thank Olympus. I was worried I left it back in the valley. That would have been a bad delay. The three followed his gaze to the sword. Talia looked back up at him and held it out to him, where he smiled lightly and took the sword from her gratefully. What happened to the shield whiskers? Is that still in the valley? Talia asked. Naruto just looked at his reflection in the sword, saying nothing. Talia, Jason and Piper exchanged looks before Talia took a seat next to him. She put a hand on his uninjured shoulder. You all right, Naruto? I didn't know he existed until I was 12, said Naruto softly. They remained silent as he spoke about the entity known as Kyubi. And even then I wasn't supposed to know. I hated his presence at first, a stigma cast upon me that made me a leper. Throughout all of my first life we bickered and argued over power. I tried taming it like many other Jinchuriki had, but at the four-tailed limit I would lose myself to the power and attack anyone in my path. I swore never to use his power again. Then pain attacked and I came close to releasing Kyubi from his cell. My father's disguise amongst humanity, Minato Namikaze, stopped me. He looked at the confused younger demigods. Apollo's memories and knowledge as a mortal here, sealed away within me until I removed it. Then I was taken to America and I didn't use it once. It was quiet until my death. You were dead? Piper asked, her eyes wide. But, how? The one word held so many questions. Naruto smiled at her. A story for another time, Piper. As I was saying, it wasn't until my death that the fox and I spoke again. Lord Hades parted it from my animus, sending it to a far corner of the underworld for Thanatos to watch over. As he separated the demon from me, another animus was found, one hiding within my own. It was my mother's. The demigod's eyes widened and Naruto's smile turned fond as he recalled the day he learned she lived on in him. Sure, it had sucked when he learned that his old body had been burnt and then reformed, everything reset to default for his age bracket, including his clothes and the content within them. The picture he so cherished was lost to the fires of the underworld. When Lord Hades offered me a second chance at life to appease the fates, I asked that he also give my mother a second chance. He decided that to do so we would both do two things. We would serve him in whichever way he desired without question and that we relinquish our chakra natures for something out of his brother's domains. Naruto smiled at Talia. As both Talia and Jason know, my chakra nature was once wind. My mother's was water. Kachin chose earth. He snapped his fingers and a small flame ignited on his thumb, and I chose fire. Our resurrection was assured and we returned to the world of the living, while still in the underworld. I stayed in the underworld for 5 months, getting to know my mother and Lord Hades. During that time, my mother told me something that the previous host of Kyubi, the wife to the Shodai Hokage, Minato Uzumaki, had told her. Naruto turned his head to look at Talia, his eyes meeting hers before he spoke softly. In order to counter the fox's hatred, the container had to fill themselves with love. There was an underlying hint of longing in his voice and the look in his eyes made Talia flinch slightly. There he went again with that occasional silver tongue, making her reluctantly forgive him little by little. She wanted to be so angry with him, and she was right in her decision to try to be. Naruto had kept Jason from her. That wasn't what you did, it wasn't right and there was no excuse for it, but damn it, did the whiskered blonde make it hard to stay mad at him. Once again before Talia could speak, Naruto returned his gaze to the sword and continued. The statement was confusing at first. How would our love counter the fox's hatred? I mulled this over for a few days when I wondered if perhaps we should try extending a hand to the fox instead of pushing it away. He chuckled. It wasn't the right answer. I stumbled my way into a fight that I barely walked out of alive. But I did become something that only one other had. I managed to impress and earn the respect of the mighty Kyubi no Kitsune, whose tails could cause tsunamis or split mountains. Is it some sort of monster? Jason asked. No. Kyubi is a sort of spirit, said Naruto. He decided to accompany me, but Thanatos advised against it. He trusted the fox just about as much as my father does, and that isn't a lot. I vouched for him and the fox accompanied me on my first venture out of the underworld. I was told to go east by Lord Hades, who looked bothered by something. What I didn't know was that he was just visited by Uncle Herm, who received a message from someone he was very worried about. You don't mean? Talia looked shocked. You've met Pan. Naruto looked sad at the mentioning of his cousin. Yes. And you haven't told Grover? What the hell, Whiskers? Who is Grover? Jason asked. The satyr faun I told you about, said Naruto, making Jason nod in understanding. He looked back at Talia. I wanted to, Talia-chan. I wanted to tell him so badly, but Pan wouldn't let me. After Q agreed to be turned into my weapon through nature magic, he swore me to secrecy. I made an oath on the sticks. Which would be? Piper asked. The ultimate vow, said Jason, knowing the story. To break it would bring something worse than death upon one who broke it, and he wonders why Kronos is returning? Naruto asked, suddenly realizing that the two big three's broken oaths could have very well been the cause for the return of Kronos. It seems that anything could always come back to haunt you. Are you suggesting this is our fault? Talia asked with narrowed eyes. Absolutely not, but I do think that your father and Jackson's father should be taking this threat more seriously, said Naruto. He looked back at his blade. Back to the story, Pan turned the Kyubi into my shield, but my sword was forged from Stygian iron and the Kyubi's fawn. With the shield and restraints gone, it has shown me its true form. My enemies will be blinded by its brilliance, for this is Eclipse, the eclipse. The blade gleamed lightly at the utterance of its name in Greek and Jason was grateful that the older blonde had translated it for him. Naruto hopped from the bed and gestured for the kids to make room while he swung his sword like a natural. He looked at Piper and then around the rather average-sized room. A smile spread across his face that both Talia and Jason recognized. So, Pipes, about that training I mentioned earlier. Naruto and Piper clashed their blades for a bit, the basics of using a dagger or knife being taught while the Gray siblings watched, their own advice coming in and out of little snippets, until the clanging of metal attracted the attentions of the ANBU and they came in with their own swords drawn. Naruto's presence out of bed had them calling for the head nurse and Shizune was none too pleased to see him up and about when he should be resting. She had started to order the other three out when Naruto stopped her. They're staying here, said Naruto firmly. He stood from the bed, wincing only slightly as he put strain on his side. I'm almost healed and I'll be set to go soon enough. What's the word on the cure? Shizune sighed and gave him a frown. With Tsunade-sama setting everything aside to work on this while the Alliance settles the bombings and gives us aid, she's almost finished. It should. Should? Naruto asked, his eyes narrowing. He wasn't going to let them try to hold him here with the promise of a cure that wouldn't come if they chose. Heads would roll if they were stupid enough to try. Should be done by tomorrow, said Shizune with her own narrowed eyes. She's still Hokage, Naruto. She has other responsibilities now. See, when I tried using that excuse I was called a liar and a traitor, said Naruto, his annoyance clear on his face. He crossed his arms over his chest and his sun-filled eyes locked on Shizune's dark ones. Don't start, Naruto. Please? Shizune asked. Naruto dropped the issue and sat back on the bed with Talia sitting on his uninjured side. Shizune rubbed her head. If it means that much to you, I'll bring in a few more blankets and pillows. This won't be a regular thing, though. I know, said Naruto with finality. He waited for Shizune to leave before turning to address the two sitting on the chairs to the side of the room. So do you two want the bed or will Talia and I be sharing it? Talia smacked him upside the back of his head for the question that flew over Jason's head while Piper put her hands over her slightly red face. It seemed as though Naruto was making a quick recovery. Chapter 19. Naruto woke as he usually did with the sun, his eyes blearily opening to lock onto the dark patch of hair attached to the head that rested on his chest. Talia slept peacefully in the early morning despite not wanting to share a bed with him that night, he noted. He looked to his left, where Jason and Piper had set up some makeshift beds with the blankets and pillows Shizun brought them. He smirked at Piper's head resting on Jason's shoulder. Seemed as though blondes were the new preferred choice of partner. He frowned as he realized that meant Jackson would most likely go for his little sister. Well, there goes the plan of making friends with him. Now he has to beat some awesome into the kid if he's going to date his little sister. Well, more so than he had been before, anyway. Naruto chuckled as he recalled his last training session with Jackson before winter break ended. Ah, the 1,000 years of death lives on, Ero-sennin. Naruto thought, knowing that once it was used on you, you were determined to get someone else with the same attack. It was in fact the ultimate attack/prank. Like the classic whoopee cushion, it would live on forever. Naruto was certain of it. Talia grumbled something in her sleep and Naruto looked back down at her, then to the sunlight peeking through the window. With a small grunt of annoyance he let his head fall back to the pillow and tried to get some more sleep. It was to no avail because of Talia's sudden waking, pushing down on his stomach and the bed with a jolt. "Talia!" Naruto said with a gasp, his air leaving him from the force she put behind her push. Talia looked down at him, her eyes still a bit cloudy from sleep, until she realized what she was doing and where she was. She removed her hand from Naruto's stomach, letting him groan in relief. And here she thought she wasn't strong. Tell that to his bruised organs. Sorry, said Talia, having regained her bearings, evident by the spark that was present in her and her brother's eyes. There was something else in her eye though, a flicker of unease that had Naruto frowning slightly. You alright? Yeah, fine, said Talia, just a bit too quickly. Naruto wanted to push on it, but was stopped by her changing the subject. Wow, and you thought you were smooth. Naruto followed her gaze to the two younger teens and he chuckled again. I'd take credit for that, but Raijiji's got some game. Managed to make you, despite his old age. Talia smirked at that. She quickly got out of the bed, stretching as she did, and walked over to the resting duo. Clearing her throat, she put on her best glare and locked it onto Jason. Her hands went to her hips and with her scowl in place, Talia woke her little brother with a loud, stern cry of Jason. The younger Grace shot awake, fully alert and his trusty coin Julius in hand, ready to be flipped. Consequently, his sudden return to the consciousness had succeeded in also jolting Piper from her rest. Her hand went to the dagger resting at her side, blearily looking around while her bedmate was up and at M. Jason's frantic search for danger ended when his eyes landed on the glaring form of his older sister. All of his courage left him when her electric blue eyes narrowed. What did I do? I cannot believe you. Here I thought you had a bit more of the better qualities of our father, yet here you are, trying something so soon with a girl you just met. What but I? Naruto watched with a very amused smile on his face, his eyes catching the confused Pipers and winking at her, cluing her into the joke. The daughter of Aphrodite was quick to figure out what Talia had meant. Spending most of the night after her mock lesson with Naruto had reignited her passion for learning about Greek mythology, or rather, Greek history. It was common knowledge among the basic students that Zeus was known as one of the more active of the Big Three, as Piper learned the brothers were called. Jason looked to his friend for some help, finding none as Naruto shook his head in shame with a displeased frown on his face. Inwardly, Jason felt betrayed by Naruto's silence and just a bit angry at the older teen. Like Naruto hadn't ever woken up with a girl in his bed before, the hypocrite. Naruto had boasted of his deflowering if only to shut up his Roman brothers, but the fact remains, Naruto was among the last people to be berating him for doing something like this. Piper couldn't contain her amusement and let out a giggle, making Jason look at her in confusion. Seeing his face only furthered her amusement and made her burst into laughter. Jason frowned at her laughter and turned back to Naruto, blinking as the whiskered blonde joined in with Piper. His gaze went back to his sister to see her scowl had fallen back into a smile. Oh my gods, Jason, I can't. Talia failed to finish her sentence because she followed her boyfriend's example, joining him and Piper in their laughter. Jason looked around at the three, confusion written on his face. So wait. Does this mean I'm not in trouble? Naruto nearly split his gash back open, he was laughing so hard. Jason's naivety almost rivaled Jackson's, but his seriousness, appearance and nobility resembled Annabeth's. Shame he was Roman, otherwise Naruto wouldn't be sure who Jason's parent was, or in the previous comparison's case, parents. As he shared a laugh with Helios over the comparison between his little sister, Jackson, and Jason, Naruto couldn't help but wonder what was going on at the camp. "It's at times like this that I wondered if I should have just stayed at camp," said Percy as they ran after the scurrying metal spider. The second Nico dropped it on the ground in the labyrinth, it shot off into the darkness, barely staying in sight for a second. The only reason they could still follow it was because of Grover and Tyson's excellent hearing, and Nico was just a bit faster than the lot of them, being able to keep a longer glance on it. "Apparently running from the three-headed guard dog of the underworld around the river Styx is good for you, who knew? Please, you enjoy getting into trouble," Annabeth said jokingly as she panted and they rounded a corner. She caught a glimmer of the metal spider as it squeezed its way through a rather wooden and numbered door. The faded bronze numbers painted onto the door was 101, with some words lost to time above it. "Okay, it's in there, we can take a break now, right?" Grover asked, panting heavily. He didn't know how Juniper could handle running for so long, and he wondered what he did to be able to catch her. Annabeth shook her head at his question. "No, we have to keep going or we'll lose it." "Joy," said Nico blandly. "Maybe we should have asked for a leash." "Yeah, probably not the best idea," said Percy, noticing Annabeth's shiver at the thought of the metal arachnid look-alike on a leash. Taking another breath, Percy grabbed the door handle and pushed it open. Immediately, he blanched and regretted doing so. Why? He discovered his personal prison, a place most teens hate nearly every day of the week. A classroom. Crunch. Looking down, at his foot, he found a split bone that was hanging off the hip of a very old skeleton that was hanging off the door handle from within. Oh, wonderful. It was a classroom with skeletons. "And I thought I would die in school," said Nico under his breath as the rest of the quest members followed Percy into the room. "The immortals," said Annabeth, covering her nose like Grover did. "How can you two stand it?" "Son of Hades," said Nico nonchalantly. It made sense that the smell of decomposition wouldn't bother him as much as it would anyone else since he was the son of the Prince of Darkness. They turned to Percy. "The stables were worse," he said. Percy's response was immediately understood and Nico's lips quirked up a bit in amusement. There was a clearing throat and the group looked at the other side of the room where they found the monster that made most of these skeletons. Standing on a dais at the other end of the room was a very unique creature captured by the Egyptians in stone construct. The body of a large lion sat atop the dais, but where a feline head should be, a woman's was. Her hair was pulled back into a bun and the face would have been pretty, but she wore far too much makeup. Pinned to her chest was a blue ribbon that read, "This monster has been rated exemplary, Sphinx." Tyson immediately named the monster, a whimper escaping him as he saw it. Memories of running away and being attacked by a different Sphinx while on his own came crashing back and the young Cyclops swallowed loudly. His scars ached as the monster's human-like head looked over the newcomers to her domain. Percy stood protectively in front of his brother while Annabeth and Nico flanked him. Nico's hand reached for his sword's handle while Percy fingered the pen-disguised riptide. Through their peripheral vision, the demigods saw the small metal spider scuttle through the sea of skeletons that was the ground and ducked beneath the Sphinx. Annabeth made to move forward, only to succeed in making the monster roar, revealing her large fangs as she did. Annabeth wisely took a step back and her hand went to the knife pouch on her hip, slipping her fingers in to grip the handle of one throwing knife lightly in reflex. The Sphinx paid the demigod's actions no mind, coming back from her roar with a deceitfully sweet smile. Bars fell down behind the group and behind the Sphinx, caging them in the room. "Welcome new contestants," said the Sphinx with a brilliant smile on her face. "It's time to play, answer that riddle." As soon as the words left her mouth, spotlights behind her and set up around the room spun wildly like on a television show, a theme sounding eerily familiar to the Family Feuds started to play along with generic audience reactions. Nico's hand dropped along with his jaw, and the jaws of the other two demigods. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," said Nico. "Winners will receive fabulous prizes." The Sphinx continued as though the son of Hades hadn't spoken. "Pass the test and you may advance, but fail and I'll eat you. Either way, I win." "Oh great, she's one of those teachers," said Percy. Honestly, the teachers who said far too much that they wanted you to succeed kind of grated on his nerves. Then again, they were better than Naruto, who literally put him on edge whenever he was teaching Percy about Greek myth or history. That was something Naruto was adamant about putting, or rather pounding, into Percy's brain. It's not a myth if it's true. Another thing Naruto did was incorporate the damn height measurement lesson into pop quizzes, where Blackjack once again gleefully helped the blonde. As far as Percy was concerned, Blackjack was not getting any donuts for a while. "I'll handle this," said Annabeth, relaxing a bit, and took an unfortunate contestant's place, knocking it to the ground with a loud clatter. Sorry. Welcome, Annabeth Chase." That certainly got the rest of the group to share a concerned glance, since Annabeth hadn't said her name. "Are you ready for the test today?" "I'm ready," said Annabeth with a confident nod. "Ask your riddle. Actually now it's 20 riddles, isn't that exciting?" asked the Sphinx, eager to begin. Nico swallowed a bit to dampen his now dry mouth. "She seems a bit too excited about this," he said softly. Percy nodded in agreement, his hand now holding Riptide tightly. He was ready to jump in if the case need be. Annabeth, meanwhile, was bewildered. But back in. "Would you rather accept the failure?" asked the Sphinx, a wide grin on her face that once again showed off her sharp teeth. "As you can see, I am perfectly fine with that." Annabeth worriedly looked to the group. Nico gripped his sword but stayed his ground, giving her his silent support. Grover and Tyson both straightened up, though Tyson's eye was flickering between her and the Sphinx. Her gaze locked on Percy, who gave her a reassuring nod, before she turned back with a rekindled fire in her eyes. "I'm ready." The Sphinx frowned in disappointment, obviously looking forward to a free and easy meal, but accepted the demigoddess choice. With a sigh, she stamped her paw on the dais, and a thin test booklet along with a brand new number 2 pencil appeared before Annabeth on the podium where she stood, mystifying the daughter of Athena. "Number 1. The Sphinx's excited voice snapped Annabeth from whatever questions were running through her head. A drumroll started before the Sphinx spoke again. "What is the capital of Bulgaria?" Annabeth blinked, stunned at the question that she was asked. It worried Percy for a moment, while Grover and Nico seemed to mimic Annabeth's confusion, before the girl found her voice. "Sophia, but..." "Correct," said the Sphinx, her smile wide, but not as wide as before. "Make sure to mark your answer correctly on your test sheet. Fill the bubbles in clearly, but stay inside the lines. If you have to erase, be sure to erase completely, or else the machine can't read your answers." "And if the machine..." The Sphinx growled a bit at being interrupted, but put a pleasant smile back on her face before gesturing to a box set near one of the spotlights to the side. It was bronze, covered in gears and levers, but what really sent the quest takers for a spin was Hephaestus mark Ada being on the side of the box. "As I was saying, if the machine can't read your answers, it's automatically wrong, and if it's wrong, well, I think you know what happens then," said the Sphinx, another feral grin on her face. It fell once more for the pleasant smile to return. "Next question." "Wait a minute, what about the riddle about man?" Annabeth asked. "Oh, that riddle grew old, and that snooty little Oedipus spread the answer around with his boasts," said the Sphinx, her hackles raised in the memory of the man that solved her famous riddle. Shaking her anger off, the Sphinx smirked. "Got his comeuppance in the end, though, didn't he? And, well, Hera found me to still be useful and offered my services to several of the other gods. Hephaestus took to me instantly. The rest, as they say, is history." "Is that a good enough reason, Annabeth Chase, or would you like me to think up another?" Annabeth bristled at the Sphinx's words. "So because one guy solved the riddle she had to deal with 20 of them?" She glanced past the monster to the bars where the metal spider had dashed through, before looking back with determination written on her face. "Maybe they'll get harder, and more riddle-like, as they went on." "Fine," she said, marking the answer with a displeased frown on her face. "These questions better get harder." "Good, second question," said the Sphinx. Annabeth crossed her arms over her chest as the drums rolled again. "What is the square root of 16? Oh, for the love of..." 4. Annabeth marked the answer with a very noticeable scowl on her face. The Sphinx paid it no mind, however, simply smiling. "Correct." "Which president of the United States signed the Emancipation Proclamation?" "Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president," said Annabeth, her teeth gritting in annoyance. They weren't getting harder, nor were they becoming riddles. "Correct again." "Don't forget to mark it down, dear," said the Sphinx. "Next." "No. I beg your pardon?" the Sphinx asked, a look of annoyance crossing her own face. "I refuse to answer these questions," said Annabeth. "Riddles, dear," said the Sphinx with a huff. Now, how much force is required to? They aren't riddles, said Annabeth as she slammed her hands onto the podium, cutting the Sphinx off. Riddles are supposed to make you think. How in the world would I test how you think? These riddles are sanctioned to test your mental capacity and whether you are worthy or not to move forward. They are not riddles, Annabeth said, openly showing her displeasure over the whole scenario. Annabeth, can't you, just play along? Percy asked, getting her to turn around and glare at him. Yeah, just answer the questions so we can move on, said Grover, agreeing readily with his friend and eager to go back to finding Pan. I'm a child of Athena, the goddess of wisdom and a goddess of intelligence, said Annabeth, her arms crossing once again as she looked back at the Sphinx with a stink eye. These questions are an insult to my intelligence. I refuse to answer any more. Oh great, said Nico dryly. She's got a big head. I heard that, Nico. You were meant to, Annabeth. Well then, Annabeth Chase, if you won't pass, then you fail, said the Sphinx, that eager fawn-filled smile back on her face. The spotlights spun around until they shone obnoxiously in the demigod's, Satyr and Cyclops' eyes. The Sphinx continued, her eyes now dark as the night. And since you fail, that means you would be held back. I can't have that stain my perfect record, so you'll just have to be eaten. Annabeth move, said Nico, unsheathing his sword as Percy prepared Riptide. The blonde girl did, diving out of the way as the monster pounced at her. Coming out of the roll she dove into, Annabeth pulled out one of her throwing knives and tossed it at the Sphinx's eye. The monster's small human-like head ducked under the knife and it once more pounced at her. Tyson came to Annabeth's rescue by tackling the Sphinx mid-air, an angry cry coming from the Cyclops' mouth as he did. They landed in a pile of bones with a loud crash. Percy, Grover and Nico made their way to Annabeth's side, Grover helping the daughter of Athena back to her feet while Percy and Nico covered them. Nico had fallen into an alien stance that Percy for the life of him didn't understand, the sword held at an angle in front of the partially crouching son of Hades. It looked official and quite frankly, kind of cool. Tyson got back to his feet, his shirt clawed and torn, standing in front of the two sword-ready demigods. Sadly, so did the Sphinx, her mouth curled into a snarl as she tried to find an opening to get to the failed student. Annabeth moved to join the two boys, but Percy took another step in front of her. Put your hat on, he said. What? No. I can fight, I killed Geryon didn't I? Yeah, but she's after you, said Percy. Let us handle her and stay out of the way so we don't have to worry about you. You don't have to worry about me dash. Hey, I know that you both have this thing, but let's save it for after the monster is dead, okay? Nico asked. Annabeth, just do what Percy says. This way if you get an opening you can take a shot without risking your location. Percy, you're with me on distraction. That's actually a really good idea, said Annabeth, a bit upset she hadn't thought of it. Like I said, a big head. Shut up, Nico. Annabeth, hat. Percy said as Tyson dropped his massive fist atop the Sphinx's head as it tried to take a chunk out of his shoulder, making the monster growl at the Cyclops and back away. Right, said Annabeth, pulling her Yankees cap out and onto her head. She vanished and aside from the soft shuffling of through the bones. Grover, hang back, said Nico. Big guy, let her through. Tyson looked back quickly at Percy, who nodded, before quickly backing away from the Sphinx. The two cousins stood tense as the Sphinx growled at them. Where is she? She failed and must be dealt with. Only one I see being dealt with is you, ugly, said Nico, making the Sphinx's hackles rise again. The whole lot of you are going to feed me for days, said the Sphinx, leaping at the son of Hades. Nico ducked to the left and swung at the underside of the Sphinx, cutting her flesh. Her leap interrupted from the slash via Nico's Stygian blade. The Sphinx landed about as gracefully as an elephant, crashing on her side into a giant mound of skeletons. The Sphinx growled as she got up, taking a bronze throwing knife to the shoulder as soon as she had. She swiveled her gaze to where the knife had come from after roaring in pain and anger. A skeleton shifted and the Sphinx's eyes glistened in excitement, becoming cat-like slits as she prepared to pounce again. Percy ran forward, using a mound of decomposing bodies as a springboard to jump and slash down at the Sphinx's head, missing the ideal target as the Sphinx leapt once more, but getting a good deep cut into the Sphinx's hindquarters. Once again, the Sphinx landed with a crash, growling at the son of Poseidon before being put on the defensive as Nico rushed forward through the shadows to her right, stabbing in the direction of her ribs. The Sphinx dodged by leaning back on her hindquarters, but then took another bronze throwing knife to the side, just below her ribs. Little brat. I'm going to savor your corpse. Well, she's got some good banter, said Nico, having stepped back to stand next to Percy. Percy arched a brow in question, prompting Nico to shrug. Kushina said that banter was a very necessary part of fighting. If done well, it can help you manipulate your opponent. I'll bet, said Percy, recalling how he and Naruto enraged the Nemean lion in the winter with jeers to make it roar. Heads up, said Nico, both boys diving forward and a bit to the right and left respectively as the Sphinx charged at them. They brought their swords up and swung their swords at the same time in a show of impressive synchronization, cutting both of the Sphinx's concealed wings off. The scream that came from the Sphinx had both boys covering their ears. The ensuing crash of metal meeting head had them looking with awe to see Tyson bringing the pain down on the monster, bludgeoning the Sphinx with her own machine. The wrecked machine was dropped when the Sphinx smacked the young Cyclops to the side, her hackles raised to the highest as she roared in anger. Riddle me this, riddle me that, who's no better than a big stupid cat? Annabeth's voice echoed around the room. Show yourself, Annabeth Chase. You failed, said the Sphinx, enraged. Annen. Wrong answer, said Annabeth. A final bronzed throwing knife shot from the corner of the room into the back of the Sphinx's head. You lose. No-oh. The Sphinx's scream echoed in the room as she dissolved into golden dust. Left behind on the floor was a bronzed staff curved into a large question mark, the Sphinx engraved along the side of the shaft. Annabeth reappeared next to it, her hat in hand, and quickly picked the staff up, balancing it in her hand before dropping it onto the ground, letting it bounce back up into her hand. Smugly smirking at the two boys, she said. Riddle me this, riddle me that, who is the one with the coolest hat? Riddler? Nico asked. Riddler. Nice. I know. That was awesome, Annabeth, said Grover, who had been keeping his distance during the fight, as he and Tyson walked up to them. He looked at the rising gates and something clicked in his head. Oh no. The spider. I can't hear it. What? Annabeth said, horrified. We wasted too much time with the Sphinx, said Nico, his face a bit pale. We've got no choice but to go forward, said Percy. He capped Riptide and rushed for the open tunnel. Let's go. The group followed him, Annabeth gripping her trophy tightly as she ran after him. All of them were running as fast as they could to catch up with the spider, which had long since gone through here. The tunnel was dark save for the occasional torch, and a few times Percy lost sight of the others. They were about 15 minutes into the tunnel when Tyson made a surprised cry. Nico! The other three stopped and looked around. The son of Hades was nowhere to be found. He might have fallen, said Annabeth nervously. We can't go back. We have to go back, said Percy in return. We can't just leave him back there. He can catch up, Percy. But what if he's hurt? We'll just have to come back for him. Are you even hearing yourself? We don't have the time, Percy. This is Nico. So what if he called you big-headed? It's not about that, said Annabeth, visibly distressed as she shouted at him. I know it's Nico, Percy, but we have to put the camp first. She looked very uncomfortable saying that. Percy felt even worse. Then you go on, I'll go back and look for him. Don't bother, said Nico, emerging from the shadows with sweat dripping down his face. Found the spider. It's only a few minutes ahead. How did you dash? Find it? Nico cut Percy off. Easy, shadow travel. Tunnels are lined with them, so it wasn't hard to find the spider. Gods above, Nico, at least tell us next time, said a very relieved Annabeth. What Naruto would have done if he found out I left someone behind. Yeah, he'd probably be mad if you left Nico, said Percy. Not just Nico, said Annabeth. Naruto's got a firm rule that he abides by, those who break the rules are trash, but those who abandon their friends and precious people are worse than trash. Oh yeah, said Percy. He recalled the phrase and mulled it over in his head a few times. It had a nice ring to it. Well, except for the precious people bit, that just sounds a bit funny. Hey, the pep talk is nice and all, but that spider thing is getting away, let's go, said Nico. The two older demigods nodded and once more the group ran. They hit a few stumbles, Nico diving back into the shadows for a brief moment to catch up with the spider and quickly backtrack to the group. Nico was too tired to continue shadow walking like this, nearly collapsing when he tried to do it again after they lost the spider a third time. Annabeth told him to rest while Tyson carried him, getting a disgruntled agreement from the tired son of Hades when he was given a piggyback ride by the Cyclops. Their solution came from Tyson, whose head turned to the right as they came across a crossroads. He pointed down the dark tunnel. Their noise. Like ping, ping, ping. You think that could be it? Percy asked Annabeth. She shrugged. Worth a shot, said Annabeth. The group turned right, going into the dark tunnel and then left at least half a mile in. To their relief, they found the small metal spider banging its tiny body against the door that resembled a bronzed submarine hatch. Right where the porthole should be was another Ada, marking this as Hephaestus' door. Way to go, Tyson. Grover said, patting the Cyclops on the side of the arm. He was too short to reach Tyson's shoulder, as Nico dropped down from Tyson's back. Finally, said Nico with a soft cough. Think he's got some water? Doubt it, but I do, said Annabeth, moving her staff to the side and unzipping her bag, pulling out a water bottle. Percy gaped at it and then at Annabeth's backpack, which looked practically empty. His jaw popped open as Annabeth put her staff into the pack, watching it disappear into thin air. What the heck was that? He asked while Nico thankfully drank the water. What? Annabeth asked, zipping her bag up. Your bag. How'd you fit your cane in there? First of all, Percy, it was a staff. Secondly, seals. Duh. Oh, you just have to rub it in my face that I can't do seals, don't you? Percy asked playfully. Naruto had kept good on his offer to try to teach the boy seals, but it didn't go so well. Not because of the lack of cha-cha or whatever Naruto called that energy, since Naruto would supply it and then some, but it was because of Percy's ineptitude when it came to complicated equations or formulas. He just couldn't wrap his head around it. Thankfully, Naruto understood, saying it took him nearly one whole year with his master, who was a master at it, to just get the basics down. Annabeth, however, was a natural and was quickly becoming Naruto's star pupil in the subject, though she was miffed that she couldn't write notes down or experiment without him present. Yep, said Annabeth as she smirked at Percy while slinging her bag over her shoulder. So, you ready to meet Hephaestus? Not really, said Percy. Give me a minute, said Nico. Yes. Tyson said excitedly, barely restraining himself as he walked forward and grabbed the wheel, twisting it and throwing the door open. Steam rushed out and the spider scuttled in, Tyson right behind it. They entered into the what could only be called a mechanic's paradise. Tyson was nearly drooling at all the neat things his massive eye could rest on. There were hydraulic lifts with cars and other strange machines on them, a bronze hippolytrian with its head resting on the ground beneath it, a metal lion hooked up to what looked like a car battery, and a gleaming gold chariot with a Greek sun adorning the front and a small dent in its side. There were many other smaller projects resting upon what had to be at least 12 workbenches, and Percy's eyes lingered on a few bronzed arrows with schematics hanging behind them. One arrowhead was glowing a bright gold, taking him back to the whiskered blonde son of Apollo. They walked forward into the workshop and as they did so a faint sound could be heard alongside some banging. So hot. I want to get you alone. You're so hot, I want to get you stoned. So hot, I don't want to be your friend, I want to fuck you like I'm never gonna see you again, oh ow. Who? Talk about a heated song. And that was Kid Rock So Hot here on 100.7 FM, The Sun, home of all your hottest hits of the summer. Next up, let's go back to the pop-in styles of Justin Timber. The radio DJ was cut off as someone grunted and turned off the radio with a loud click. The banging resumed and the group found themselves looking at a '98 Toyota Corolla, or rather, at the legs of the large man underneath it. He had on gray pants, dark boots that were on feet larger than Tyson's, and one leg had a metal brace wrapped around it. The metal spider skittered under the Toyota and got the man to stop his banging once again. Well, what have we here? Said a deep and gruff voice, one that sounded faintly familiar to Percy, having heard it before. The man came out from under the car on a back trolley, standing up with the spider in his hand. His appearance was vastly different from the one he had when on Olympus, since he was in the sanctity of his workshop. His left shoulder fell lower than the right and his head was a bit disfigured, bulging in one spot with a rather nasty scar around it. He wore a gray jumpsuit smeared with oil, ash and grim, one of the cleanest parts being the embroidered over the pocket. His beard was long and untamed, and what looked like the occasional fire seemed to start in it. Hephaestus, god of the forge, stood before them in his semi-natural state, playing with the small spider that he swiftly disassembled and reassembled with ease. The small metallic spider crawled around in his massive hands that treated it with the utmost care. There was a gleam in the god's eye, one of pride and one of amusement. "There, much better," he said. The spider did one's last lap around Hephaestus' arm before stopping in his palm. It gave a happy flip, shot a metallic web at the ceiling, and went swinging away. Nico was unable to stifle the amused snicker that escaped him at the sight, bringing Hephaestus' attention to them. The god looked them over, his eyes lingering on Nico's sword handle for a moment, before gazing intently at them. "I didn't make you, did I?" No, sir," said Annabeth after she thought about his question. Initially she had thought he meant with a woman, but realized that this was a craftsman in front of her and thought them something else. "Good. Shoddy workmanship if I did," said Hephaestus. He scratched his beard as he looked them over again. "Half-bloods. Could be automatons, but most unlikely." We've met before, sir," said Percy, shuffling a bit where he stood as the god's gaze fell over him. "Have we?" "Yes, sir. Last winter." "Last winter?" He stroked his beard once more in thought. "Ah, yes, you're Poseidon's boy." Hephaestus nodded, his hand dropping to his side. "You were there with Nat made the fish tank, you know. For the Alpheataurus. Took a few days, a couple of remeasurements every now and then." As he spoke his eyes fell over the last two members, first Grover. A satyr. Then they landed on Tyson, and the harsh gleam that had been in his dark eyes seemed to lighten a bit. "And a cyclops? What are you doing traveling with the half-bloods, boy?" Tyson only stared in wonder at the god. For him, it was like meeting an idol. "Ah, I see," said Hephaestus. He nodded in silent agreement before looking at the ragtag group once again before his eyes latched onto Nico's sword. Shaking himself from his thoughts, Hephaestus looked back at Percy. "So why are you here?" "The suspension on this Corolla is shit and my time is wasting with the interruption, sir," said Annabeth, getting the god's attention. "We're looking for Daedalus." "We were hoping that." "Daedalus." Hephaestus' demeanor changed from annoyed to outraged, his eyes hardening once again and his beard bursting into flame. "What would the likes of you want with that scoundrel? Seeking him out, are you daft?" "No, sir, we need his help," said Annabeth. "The camp is in trouble." "The camp is always in trouble," said Hephaestus with a roll of his eyes as his beard went out. "You're wasting your time." He hobbled over to one of his workbenches and within seconds had constructed a bronze and silver falcon that flew around the room, making Tyson laugh gleefully. The kind gleam reappeared in Hephaestus' eye as he regarded the Cyclops now petting the mechanized falcon that landed on his shoulder. "I sense you want to tell me something, Cyclops. Speak your mind, son." Tyson's smile and the finger that was prodding at the metal bird's beak dropped. "Why yes, sir. We met a 100-handed one." To his credit, Hephaestus hardly blinked. "Briars?" "Yes. He was scared. Wouldn't help us. And this surprised you." It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. Hephaestus could see the unease written on the Cyclops' face as clear as one could feel Ares' bloodlust enter a room. "Yes. Greatly. Briar should be strong. Older and braver than Cyclopes, but he ran." Tyson seemed very upset by this event. "I understand," said Hephaestus. "I looked up to the Briars once too, young Cyclops. Back during the First War, I saw no superior to my craft than them. They were good acquaintances. But time has changed things, people, monsters, and even the gods." Hephaestus seemed to drift off, his eyes clouding with a bit of anger. "Look at my loving mother, Hera. You've met, I'm sure. She's one of the few that know where I can be found. She spouts all sorts of things about love and family that would make Hestia jealous, but she's no more than a hypocrite. Took one look at me and cast me down from Olympus. But I thought that was Zeus," said Nico with a frown. Hephaestus snorted. "You'd be wrong, halfling. My mother likes having good PR, that is the phrase, yes? And so has my father tell that story to cover for her. Not like he minds. Order knows he's got enough of a bad rep for it to be accepted. Can't trust anyone these days, not even family." "You trust Naruto, though," said Annabeth, making Hephaestus look at her. "You make weapons for him." "We've seen them." "Arrows," said Hephaestus, correcting her. "And they take a second to make. A snap of my fingers and they are together." This does not mean I trust Nat. Naruto, said Percy, correcting the god. I know what I said, said Hephaestus with a scowl. Honestly, why that name I'll never know. Naruto. Bah, sounds like a bad food. My nephew does have talent though, why call him Nat? Tyson asked. He's a natural craftsman, said Hephaestus with a bit of a smile to the Cyclops, as much as he could manage. Outside of the box sort of thinker, one Apollo could be if he turned off the radio and parked his chariot every now and then. Would have been proud to have a kid like that, too bad he can't work for shit, though. Like his father in that area, more theoretical than practical. But he's got all those cha-cha attacks, said Percy, recalling the spiraling sphere that nearly tore Atlas apart. That's practical, right? Chakra, Percy, said Annabeth. The teen shrugged the correction off. That's different, said Hephaestus. That's fighting. I don't do fighting. I arm the fighters. Who do you think made Ares' sword? Or Apollo and Artemis bows? When it comes down to it, I'm the reason why most of my family can still fight. Do they thank me? No. I'm just the smith god, I'm required to make the weapons. Granted, I do enjoy a challenge, but being asked to polish a shield? A spearhead? Restoring a bow? Without thanks, mind you. I tolerate my family because of my position and because occasionally I do get a good challenge every 100 years or so. Naruto polite, said Tyson, recalling getting thanked on multiple occasions by the blonde after he got some more of those small throwing knives he liked getting made. Tyson enjoyed the tedious creations, too. He thought it was a good way to start off the day before getting into his more creative constructs, like a shield for Percy. Hephaestus grunted begrudgingly. All right, yes. Nat is pretty grateful, but that's more than anyone else can say. You three are being polite because of what I am, not because of who I am. Annabeth winced at that being pointed out. He had a point there. Tyson's respect came from his inner smith looking up to an idol, but hers was purely focusing on Hephaestus' status as an Olympian. She should probably rethink her strategy on dealing with him. This wasn't like dealing with most gods. Bottom line is, all you can trust is the product of your own hands, said Hephaestus, gesturing around to his workshop. Nico shook his head and Hephaestus arched a brow. You disagree? Yes, but trusting others is how you stay strong, said Nico. He remembered how Kushina would force him and Bianca to spar against her together, making them learn how to fight in tandem. You had to trust your life to someone else every now and then, otherwise you'd never win, be it family or a friend. Your sword is Stygian, isn't it? Hades' child, aren't you? Hephaestus asked, his brow furrowing. Nico nodded and Hephaestus looked around. Wasn't it Nat's job to guard you? He's busy, said Nico, making Annabeth and Percy's brows furrow. He crossed his arms over his chest. I can take care of myself. Sure you can, lad, said Hephaestus, stopping his search for his nephew. His gaze went to Percy, who was glowering slightly as he recalled his first quest with Annabeth and Grover. You have something to say as well? Only what we asked before, said Percy. We need to find Daedalus. There's this guy, Luke. He's working for Crow. Do not say his name here, boy. The crooked one, said Percy. We need to find Daedalus before he does. I already told you that it's a waste of time, Daedalus won't help you. Why not? Some of us get thrown off mountains, said Hephaestus, gesturing to his head. Some of us learn in more painful methods. Ask me for gold, a sword or even arrows and I'll grant you them easy. He snapped his fingers. Like that. But away to Daedalus? That's an expensive favor. So you do know where he is, said Annabeth. It's not wise to go looking for someone who doesn't wish to be found, girl. My mother says that looking is the nature of wisdom. And who would your mother be? Athena. Hephaestus snorted. Figures. He sighed. Fine goddess, Athena. Shame she pledged to never marry. He was silent for a moment before shaking his head and looking at the daughter of Athena. All right, half-blood. I'll give you a way to Daedalus, but you need to do me something. Something big. Chapter 20. So, that sucks, said Nico as he, Annabeth and Percy continued down their chosen path to Hephaestus' favored workshop at Mount St. Helens. They once again followed the quick and nimble little metal spider, much to Annabeth's dismay, but had hit a crossroads with a tunnel that looked like an entryway to a fairy tale. Grover and Tyson had split off, Grover smelling something that told him Pan was in the tunnel's direction, and Tyson, wanting to prove Hephaestus wrong about trusting, went with him. "Shut up, Nico." Annabeth had never been more distraught. She had let the two split off for the group while trying to stay true to her plan. Keeping her group together was the largest part of that plan. Without any heroics, that was hard to keep Percy from doing, she noted. She'd be among the few to bring back a fully intact group from a quest. Percy and Naruto were both on that list, and, no offense to her friend or brother, they were both kind of idiots. If they could manage it, so could she, or so she thought. "We're losing the spider, let's go," said Percy, trying to shake Annabeth from her depressing thoughts. They continued to run, Annabeth stumbling as her mind continued to race miles ahead of her, dashing to different strands of thoughts in the only way a child of Athena could. These were costing them time, and Nico turned to look at her, catching sight of her unease. "Hey, are you all right?" Nico asked. Annabeth, that certainly snapped her from her thoughts, and she responded with the distracted "What?" "You're distracted," said Nico. The spider seemed to have slowed down a bit. It was staying in sight for once, relieving the demigods greatly from their run. "Sorry," said Annabeth. She was still a bit distracted. Just thinking about the prophecy." "What part of it?" Percy asked as they continued to follow the small spider. He had been focused on a part of the prophecy himself during his first quest, the part about his mother. "The last line," said Annabeth, her face twisted into a frown as she continued to think about it. "And lose a love to a fate worse than death." Percy thought, a small unpleasant pain forming in his chest. "That Luke guy, right?" Nico asked. "And Naruto," said Annabeth, distracted. She slapped a hand over her mouth while the two dark-haired boys came to a dead stop in surprise. Stopping herself, Annabeth quickly turned to the two boys with pink cheeks. I mean he's my brother, right? I'm just worried about him on his quest." "You have a crush on him, don't you?" Nico asked in childlike innocence that she forgot he had, since he was still 11 but acted so much older since his return from the underworld. Annabeth's cheeks turned a bit darker and Percy felt as though he had been sucker-punched in the gut. "No," said Annabeth, her face burning as she denied it. He's my brother and I care about him, okay? Sibling love counts." Nico thought she was just making up excuses, but shrugged it off. She had a point. He loved Bianca and was worried about her. Plus, he was 11. What does he know about this stuff? Percy, however, didn't know what to think except that he wasn't exactly a fan of Naruto at the moment. Annabeth had a crush on Luke and Naruto. It was like he had no chance. He sighed softly. Aphrodite did say his love life was going to be complicated because she liked him, so maybe this was what she meant, not getting Annabeth to like him like he did her. Well, there was that old saying, "There's other fish in the sea." Didn't mean it didn't cut deep, though. "So, anyway," said Annabeth, eager to change the subject, Nico. "I don't want to say this but—" "Whoa, hold your horses," said Nico to the older girl. "If you even think about telling me to leave, I'm going to say one thing, Sphinx. Without me, you'd never have killed it." "I wasn't going to ask you to leave," she said. Annabeth begrudgingly acknowledged that fact, though it irked her a bit. She shook it off as best she could and recomposed herself. "What I was going to say was that I want you to go ahead and get a peek at what the spider is going to deal with." "Oh. Well, sure, yeah. Give me a few minutes," said Nico before he turned and walked into the shadows, melding with them and vanishing from view. "Okay, that's cool," said Percy with a bit of jealousy in his tone. "Wish I could teleport." "Yeah, but we've got to work with what we've got," said Annabeth. "Come on, we should at least keep walking so that we don't fall too far behind Nico and the machine." Percy smiled lightly at the choice of her words, finding a bit of amusement in it. They continued to walk, Percy content with the silence and it just being the two of them. Well, content was a bit of a stretch. He was okay with it, but he also wanted to ask Annabeth if she really did have a crush on Naruto. It was one of those questions he wanted to know the answer to and yet didn't. "Listen, Percy, thanks," said Annabeth, breaking the silence. "Thanks for sticking with me through all this, it means a lot." "Hey, I told you earlier that it wasn't a problem," said Percy, relieved that she started the conversation. "We don't know what we're doing half the time and we turn out fine." Annabeth smiled at him and he grinned back. Percy had already forgotten about the earlier conversation and Annabeth, well, she was thinking about how Percy was a good friend. She began to open her mouth to say something, but it was lost as Nico reappeared in front of them with a swirl of darkness. "Hey, I found the forge," Nico said while the two demigods jumped where they stood. He grinned at their glares. "What? Did I scare you?" "No," said Percy, who was a bit miffed that the moment was ruined. That and his heart was racing about 10 times faster than before. "Can you lead us there?" Annabeth asked. "Sure thing," said Nico with a nod. "Found a good shortcut." "You certainly got used to that shadow travel fast," said Annabeth. Nico grinned sheepishly. "Well, don't tell my dad, but I had a little bit of help. Bianca was so good at swordplay that, I wanted to impress him too." "That's understandable," said Annabeth with a nod. Percy just shrugged in agreement. He didn't know what it was like to be the younger sibling, not counting Naruto's teasing and/or training. The thought of the whiskered blonde made Percy frown a bit, before shunting those feelings aside. Unfortunately, he'd have a bit of a problem with forgetting Annabeth's comment because of Nico's next question. "So what do you think Naruto's doing right now?" he asked. "Probably driving Talia up the wall," said Annabeth with a smirk. That thought did make Percy smile, and he did wonder what was going on with his hot-tempered cousin. "I'm going to kill him," said Talia. She was now dressed in another set of clothes, dark and a bit form-fitting, save for her leather jacket. Piper, likewise, had changed into a pair of jeans and a t-shirt of her own, both of them looking at the younger Grace as he explained how he'd lost Naruto. After they had a good laugh at Jason's expense, the girls asked the whiskered blonde if they could have their clothes back, which he obliged to by unsealing their stuff. Talia then shoved the two blondes out of the room before another word could be said. It was then that Naruto got bored. And when Naruto gets bored, well, he had to do something. So with a quick "be right back" to Jason, he was off. And now Jason was left dealing with his annoyed sister, which said annoyed sister glared at him for announcing that fact. "So he just walked off?" Talia asked. "For 30 minutes? Yeah, I thought he had to use the bathroom," said Jason, as she and Piper looked to him for a reason why he was sitting alone in the hallway. He thought about what he said after his sister arched her brow. "Well, after 10 minutes went past I figured that wasn't the case and he was just wandering. He'll be back and I figured why should I make you worry about me when I can sit and wait? You're so lucky you're my brother that I haven't seen in years or I'd pound you for letting him wander off," said Talia in response to his well-thought-out explanation. Her boyfriend on the other hand. Gods, it was like he was a child at times and a kitten at others, curious to explore the world and unable to sit still. Talia groaned and rubbed her face with her hands. "When I find that idiot." "He didn't escape again, did he?" asked the head of the ward, Shizun, as she walked back to the group. She looked haggard compared to the previous day, her hair a bit out of place. "Damn it. First injuries from the attack yesterday finish piling in and overflowing the ER, now I have to find Naruto in the hospital." Shizun sighed angrily. "It's like he's 12 all over again. Why do you have to find him?" Piper asked. "The serum is done, but Tsunade and the other Kage want to talk to him one more time before he leaves," said Shizun. Talia's eyes narrowed. "About what?" "I don't know, but it's very important," said Shizun, looking perturbed at the comment. The fact she wasn't clued into the reason why was very concerning to her. With another groan, she entered the room Naruto was supposed to be in, hung her clipboard on the rail, and then walked back out to them. "Well, let's go find him. I highly doubt you'd like it if he was taken off without you." "You're all right, Shizun." "Shizun. Sorry. It's all right, Talia. My mistake." Piper rolled her eyes and whispered to the confused Jason. "I don't think they like each other." "Why?" he asked, eyebrows furrowed in thought. After giving him a look, Piper glanced up at the ceiling as they walked down the halls. "Boys." "What?" "Nothing, Jason. Nothing." They were quiet after that, the tense mispronunciation of names behind them as they walked through the hallways of the hospital. They checked Naruto's original hiding spots within the hospital. Apparently he wasn't a fan of vaccinations, starting with the kitchen, which was a bust, then the bathroom, and then looking up in the children's area where he would entertain kids aspiring to be ninja whose parents were sick or recovering. "Isn't she lovely?" The three demigods and medics stopped as they heard the soft, yet appealing voice singing in the distance. As they got closer to the maternity/infantry ward, the silvery low voice got clearer. They found the source of the voice in a room that Shizun told them was for a new mother who had been given a very serious arm wound during the attack. "Isn't she 1/2/full? Isn't she precious?" Less than a few months old. Shizen held a finger to her lips, then gently gripped the door handle, turning it and opening the hospital room of the maternity/infant ward. The group of 4 found the blonde they were looking for. Or rather, all 3 copies of him, each one dressed in their hospital scrubs and tank top. I never thought through love you'd be making one as lovely as she but isn't she lovely, made from love? One sat on the windowsill, an acoustic guitar in hand and strumming the chords gently. Another was playing with rhythm sticks while sitting next to the clone on the guitar. The schoolteacher Irika Yumino, who sat on the left side of the pretty brunette mother's bed with his back to the clones, and the third Naruto flanked the bedridden mother, a pink bundle in his arms as he sang softly to it. "Isn't she pretty?" Naruto sang, making good on the Stevie Wonder song. "Truly the angel's best. Boy, I'm so happy we have been heaven blessed. I can't believe what the gods have done through you they've given life to one but isn't she lovely, made from love?" Irika's hand gently wrapped around the woman sitting in the bed, a bandage on her hand. They smiled at each other before looking back at the blonde, ignoring the newcomers. The other Narutos started a chorus in the background. "Isn't she lovely?" Naruto asked, looking over at the newcomers with a happy grin on his face. He looked back at the parents of the child he was holding with the same smile. Life and love are the same love is Reiko the meaning of her name. He grinned at the mother. It could have not been done without you who conceived the one that's so very lovely made from love." The strumming clone finished with a final chord before Irika and the mother, clapped for him. Naruto stood and bowed lightly, careful to not move the bundle with his bow, before equally gently handing the bundle back, revealing the hidden face of a sleeping infant. Her eyes were closed and her face was a bit chubby, but all the same there was a light glow around her and the dark hair growing from her head. Naruto signaled for his clones to cut the music, had them seal the instruments back up before tossing the scroll to him and dispelling themselves. "That was amazing, Naruto," said Irika with a wide grin. "Thank you. Not a problem, Irika-san." "Irika," said Naruto, correcting himself at the man's dry stare. "Sorry. Old habits, you know. Don't change too much, Naruto," said Ayam, a sweet smile on her face. She reached out and patted him on the knee. "Can't have my dad's favorite customer becoming a stranger." Naruto laughed guiltily at that one. "Yeah, don't want that. Are we interrupting?" Shizen asked. Irika looked over at the group with a bit of surprise. "Oh, sorry." "No, by all means come in, come in." Not that it mattered since they were practically in the room already. Taliya, Jason and Piper went to Naruto's side of the bed, where Piper failed to resist the urge to coo at the 2-month-old baby sleeping in Ayam's arms. Taliya only did it because she had managed to build up resistance to all things cute. Unless they had whiskers, like a kitten. It was a bit of a weak spot for her. Not that anyone really knew it except Naruto. She made him swear on the sticks to keep his mouth shut when she played with Ranger when the large cat was a kitten. "I wasn't aware you spoke English, Ayam-san," said Shizen to the mother, who smiled at her sheepish husband. "Well, someone was having problems with it and I was a better student than he ever was, even if it was a civilian school," said Ayam. She smiled down at Reiko. "I think I'm going to have the first bilingual baby in the village, aren't I, Reiko-chan? My little angelic gift from the heavens. Helps that English feels right coming off of the tongue," said Naruto with a grin. He stood and gestured to his group. "Irika-san or Irika already knows them, but I figure it wouldn't hurt to introduce you to my group." He gestured Ayam as she cradled her baby. "Guys, this is Ayam Yumino, my favorite waitress." Ayam lightly swatted at him while the kids snickered along with a chuckling Irika. "This is Piper, a daughter of a guy who, works for my dad. Hi." Piper smiled and moved closer to get a look at the baby. She cooed at the sleeping Reiko. She could see where Reiko got some of her father, particularly the nose and skin tone, and some of her mother, particularly Ayam's face. "Nice to meet you, Piper," said Ayam with a smile. Naruto continued, putting a hand on Jason's shoulder. "My friend Jason, he helped me fit in after I had an accident in one of the states and I helped loosen him up a bit." Jason rolled his eyes and nodded with a small smile. "Nice to meet you. The pleasure is mine," said Ayam with a smile. "And last but certainly not least, my girlfriend Taliya," said Naruto as he stood behind Taliya and rested his arms over her shoulders in a loose hug while his chin rested on her head. He was too happy at the moment to sense Taliya's annoyance that was directed at him. Thankfully, she had managed to push it aside for later to smile at the relatively new mother. "Hello," said Talia curtly but kindly. Iam's eyes narrowed just a margin. "So you're Talia, HM?" "Yes," Talia said, taken aback by the sudden change in the mother's voice. Iam looked her up and down, scrutinizing her with a frown on her face before shrugging. "I guess you'll have to do as a godmother." "As a what now?" Talia asked. "Godmother," said Iam with a smile. Naruto-kun was so kind as to accept his position as Reiko-chan's godfather. The three looked at the sheepishly smiling Naruto. "What, godfather? You?" Jason asked. "Yeah, so what?" Naruto said. "He may not have had the best godfather/teacher in the world, but that didn't mean he'd be as bad. Hell, he already gave Reiko a blessing from Helios to be open-minded and long-sighted." "Nothing, just hard to believe," said Jason. "You're only 20. 23, said Naruto with a small frown. "In October," said Irika. "How is it we managed to have the same months as the rest of the world?" Naruto asked him. "Traders most likely," said Irika with a smile. "We grew greatly from outside trade." "Don't change the subject, Whiskers," said Talia with a bit of a frown as she slipped out of Naruto's arms. "You're going to be a godfather. We live millions of miles away." "Yeah, but I can be here in an instant if need be," said Naruto with a grin. "I told you I don't need rescuing, Talia-chan. You need restraint and someone to keep you chained down a bit to the ground," said Iam with a light laugh. She smiled at Talia. "You seem to do that very well. You know, if you lost the gruff look, you'd be very pretty, Talia." "Pass," said Talia dryly. Naruto grinned at her. "I dunno, I think Iam may be on to something," said Naruto with a smirk. "Really?" Talia crossed her arms and gave a challenging look to her boyfriend. "I also think you're pretty the way you are," said Naruto, leaning into her face with his hands behind his back. "So either way, I win." "Smooth," said Piper with a giggle while Jason chuckled a bit. Naruto grinned at the younger kids. "Don't encourage him, Piper," said Talia with a roll of her eyes. Piper nodded and Naruto pouted, standing back upright as he did. He turned to the snickering Shizen, whom he almost forgot to address in the room. "So, what's the word on the cure?" Naruto asked. His question got the woman to pay attention and stop giggling. She recomposed herself and smiled at him sadly, knowing that as soon as she told him he would be gone. "It's done," said Shizen. Tsunade-sama finished the cure. A complicated combination of the Nara deer antler, some Hyuga herbs and a couple of medical chakra techniques that she developed for her own personal use. "Anything else she used?" Naruto asked as his demeanor changed. "Could we replicate the cure if need be? We've already given a sample to the village and our allies' pharmaceutical branches," said Shizen. "It's a simple chemical realignment in the post-developmental process, so yes, it may be possible to do that." "Thank the gods," said Naruto with a sigh, earning an intrigued look from Iam from his words. Irika rubbed her hand to get her attention and silently told her that he would explain it in a more appropriate manner. Naruto, however, just stepped towards the woman with a gleam in his eye. "So where is it?" "Tsunade-sama will relinquish it to you upon your arrival at the Hokage mansion," said Shizen. "She and the other 5 Kage want you there ASAP. I just can't win with these people," said Naruto with a groan. He rubbed his forehead before returning to the bedridden mother's side. "Sorry, I couldn't stay longer to catch up, Iam." Iam waved him off with a small smile on her face. "You have to go off and save another country. Go, but promise me you'll come visit more than your godfather did." "Well, I'll do what I can," said Naruto with a grin as he leaned in to give her a hug. Irika stood up and walked over to stand in front of Naruto. "I wasn't sure initially if I gave you the best option to resign," said Irika. "When you came to me for advice, I wasn't sure what I should say. I wanted you to stay in Konoha, but I learned a long time ago that I couldn't protect you forever. You're my friend, my brother, and one of my favorite students." Irika held his hand out to the blonde, which Naruto quickly took with his own. "You're my comrade, and I'll always stand beside you." "Thanks, Irika," said Naruto before he pulled the older man into a hug. "Thank you for everything." Irika hugged him back for a second longer before they separated with smiles on their faces. Naruto turned and nodded to Shizen, who smiled lightly before leading him out of the room. Piper and Jason followed him, but Talia was held back by Irika lightly grabbing her shoulder before she could follow suit. "Keep him from doing anything too stupid," said Irika with the look of a concerned father/brother in his eye. I know how he is and how hard it can be, but try. It's all I can do, said Talia in return with a smirk. Even if it's a pain. Irika chuckled and Ayam giggled at her comment, Reiko making a soft sound as she woke up distracted Talia for a moment. She looked at the small family with a smile as Irika went back to his wife's side to coo at his daughter. It was good to know that not everyone from her boyfriend's homeland was insane. She left the 3 members of the Umino family and quickly caught up to her group. So he asked her to marry him, said Naruto, finishing up a story as she caught up to them. Wow, you really need to look into working at Hallmark, said Piper. You brought 2 people together without even being here. Like an agent of fate or something. Please, that was just chance, said Naruto, a bitter look crossing his face at the comment. What happened? Talia asked her brother quietly. Naruto was just telling us how Irika and Ayam got together, said Jason with an arched brow. Weren't you listening? Not really, said Talia. She wanted to let the topic die, but her curiosity got the best of her. How'd it happen? Apparently Naruto and Irika would usually get ramen where Ayam worked, and when he went missing Irika would go there for days in hopes that the blonde would show up. He and Ayam started to talk, connect, and well, I guess that's how it all got started, said Jason with a shrug. He wasn't paying attention to details much, but it was an interesting story nonetheless. Piper's onto something with him working at Hallmark, said Talia with a smirk. He's corny enough for it. I heard that, Talia-chan. You were supposed to, Whiskers. Naruto pouted as he turned around to look at his girlfriend, walking backwards through the hallway. Why are you so mean to me, Talia-chan? Tough love, Naruto. It's tough love, said Talia with a small smirk at him. Jason chuckled and Piper giggled at the wounded look Naruto gave her. Shizune also giggled as she watched them over her shoulder. She was going to miss Naruto, his antics always brightened the village's day, even if it was a prank. As they walked through the hospital, Shizune recalled the first time she and Naruto spoke one-on-one. Trying to convince Naruto to stop going for her master's cursed necklace in the bet they made where Naruto had to preform the initial form of the Rasengan, which took his father 3 years to design and master and their master Jiraiya no Gama 3 months to get down. In 1 week or Tsunade would take all of his money and leave him for broke. Naruto beat the odds put against him, having declared that he would break the curse of death that surrounded the necklace Tsunade had given to him, and did the impossible. He managed to preform the initial form of the Rasengan after only 1 week to learn it. An A-rank technique, at age 12. He had to be some sort of genius. A genius of hard work always surpasses inherited genius, said Tsunade once when they were discussing her former team, known as the Legendary Three. Orochimaru could never beat Jiraiya as he is now alone. That's why it always comes down to the summons coming out. Escape to fight another day, yes, but truly win against the idiot? Not a chance. Jiraiya's a monster. I don't know if I could have beaten him in strength alone. Tsunade took a drink of her sake. May the idiot rest in peace, and I hope he's giving Orochimaru a hard time down there. Shizune looked at the chuckling Naruto, who had made a comment to the now blushing Jason about finding his own girlfriend soon. Talia apparently wasn't taking that well from the glare she gave her boyfriend. He was certainly like Jiraiya, and Sakura had taken after Tsunade well. She sighed as unfortunately that meant Sasuke was taking the same path Orochimaru had taken, a dark path. And as they are like Jiraiya and Orochimaru, Naruto and Sasuke had a rivalry that destroyed lives and left craters in the planet. She could only hope that where Naruto goes, Sasuke doesn't follow, because if they continued the cycle that Orochimaru and Jiraiya were a part of, these new lands, the Americas, wouldn't stand a chance. She remembered the first time Naruto returned from their clash at the Valley of the End, battered and broken, a freshly healed lung had ribs penetrating it, he had a cracked skull from a 50-plus drive headfirst into the dirt, his left arm completely shattered and useless, and bruising all over his body. And that was when they were 12. Who knows the damage if they both went all out in a populated area. Not only that, but the war would go with them as well, since it pretty much was down to that. You were either with the Uchiha or against them, and if you were against them, all bets were off. You would be targeted, your world would be rocked, and no one was innocent in Sasuke's eyes. He was ruthless, deranged, and powerful enough to be labeled an S-rank problem at age 16 for killing Orochimaru. Hey, Shizune, you alright? You're zoning out, said Naruto, snapping the woman from her thoughts. They were already approaching the Hokage mansion. She must have been thinking about this longer than she thought. Yes, I'm fine, thank you Naruto, said Shizen with a small smile. Naruto grinned back at her. She was among the few that he would miss a lot. If Iruka was his older brother, Shizen was his older sister. Kakashi was the crazy uncle and Tsunade was the worrying grandmother. He was just glad no one babied him, he got enough of that from his mother. Talk about embarrassing. Had to be the maternal instinct she unfortunately passed away with. Well, at least now he can just shift her attention onto Nico and Bianca for some of that maternal loving. Once again, the group of demigods followed a shinobi up the many steps to Tsunade's office where, once again, they were greeted by the rest of the Kage. They were flanked this time by 2 guards each, as though they were worried about being attacked in an allied state. With a small wave to his group that told them to stay close to the door, Naruto walked forward and stood with his arms crossed over his chest. So where is the cure? He asked, almost demanding. The sooner he got the cure the sooner he could get back to Bianca and the camp to check on his family. He got the strangest feeling that something bad had happened as soon as he left his new goddaughter and her parents. Naruto couldn't put his finger on it, but he was sure that it had something to do with Percy. What happened against Sasuke Uchiha? Tsunade asked in return. Kicked his ass, blinded him and his stupid eye infection, said Naruto. You didn't kill him, said E with a scowl. He turned to one of his bodyguards, though the demigods wondered why he needed them since he was large enough to be able to challenge Ares to an arm wrestle, and said, have the village put on alert and send out the hunters to the Valley of the End. I want this over with by the end of the week. Hi, Reikage-sama, said the man with pale blonde hair and a feminine face. No, I didn't kill him, said Naruto with a frown. He could hear Q ranting at him from here. It's a good thing you didn't, said the up until now unusually quiet Helios. That's what makes you better than him. Keep that in mind. Now you make me sound like Batman or something, Naruto thought in return. He looked at Gaara when the Kazekage made a sound. Something you want to add, Gaara? Do you need assistance? The Kazekage asked. With your new problem, I mean. I'm willing to send squads with you if you need. Naruto blinked, he hadn't seen that coming. Then again, this was Gaara, the Godame Kazekage who had been born to the Yondaime and raised to hate others and love only himself. His polar opposite when they were younger. Heck, they were still somewhat opposites now. Naruto had wanted to be Hokage, but Gaara achieved the status of Kazekage at age 15 while Naruto was still a genin. Gaara led an entire village and Naruto defended one, and now he was on a council of a near-continental-wide alliance while Naruto resigned from his post. Just goes to show that life loves to throw those curves at you. Naruto shook his head to keep from thinking about that. He smiled at his friend thankfully and at the 2 bodyguards, Gaara's older siblings Kankuro the poisonous puppeteer who used war paint and Temari, the high-ranking ambassador to Konoha. Thank you for the offer, Gaara, but I'll have to decline. The battle we face is one that the elemental nations are not ready for. Just know that Suna stands with you, Naruto, said Gaara with an understanding nod. Konoha stands with you as well, brat, said Tsunade with a crooked grin. She pulled out a vial and tossed it to the blonde, who caught it with ease. He looked at the vial in his hand while Tsunade continued to speak. We have 2 more things to ask you and then you are free. She used the term loosely as Naruto pocketed the cure with a small smile to leave. Alright, what do you want to know? Naruto asked. Where is the Kyubi no Kitsune? Anoki, the Tsuchikage, asked. I refuse to believe that you have it hidden somewhere. Naruto shrugged. To tell you the truth, I don't know. What? The Kages were all on their feet, save Gaara, simultaneously demanding explanations. Sasuke destroyed my link with it, said Naruto, pointing at his wrist that usually held the gem he had to hold his sword and shield. He dropped his hands and let one slip into his scrubs. The clothes were comfortable and he was fresh as could be thanks to the hospital pocket, fingering the small flashlight that Eclipse disguised itself as. Calmly, the whiskered blonde continued. Without it, I haven't a clue where the Kyubi could be. I do know that he's most likely out of reach of Madara and without me they'll probably never find it since I only have hunches. Then tell us where it is so we can use it, said Inoki, and risk them getting all 9 of the Biju? You're a stubborn old fool, Inoki Dano, said Mei with a frown on her pretty face. She glanced slyly at the blonde teenager. Besides, I'm sure Naruto-kun can keep it safe. Meidano, please, said Tsunade with a sigh. The boy's so young to have such important information, said one of Mei's bodyguards, an old man with one eye. Back in my day we only trusted old and experienced shinobi with important details like that. Ayo? Yes, Mizuki-sama, shut up before I melt your balls off, said Mei sweetly as an aura of death waved off of her. Why yes, Mizuki-sama. Naruto took a small step away from the Mizuki. That was one threat he was not going to risk happening to him. Resistant to fire or not, he was not willing to test how resistant he was or risk his package deal either. It seemed every man in the room had the same idea as the male shinobi, no matter their rank, moved slightly away from her. Even Jason took a step back to sanctuary behind Talia and Piper. Anyway, said Tsunade, watching all of this with an amused smile on her face. She returned her gaze to Naruto. We've decided that you're far too reliable a resource to let go from one village and have decided to offer you a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She cleared her throat and all of the Kage seemed to straighten up like the previous antics hadn't occurred. Naruto Uzumaki, former genin of Konohagakure no Sato of Hai no Kuni. The allied shinobi forces are offering you the position of being the first ever Sannin in our alliance. Naruto felt his jaw pop open in shock. What? With this position of Sannin, we grant unlimited travel access in and out of the 5 great villages and other allied shinobi forces domains. We also grant you right to leave for unannounced and unrestricted periods of time provided that you write a debriefing upon your return to one of the 5 great villages. Wait a second. Considering your capability to take charge and lead a group as well as we have observed, said Tsunade, ignoring Naruto's words as he gaped at her. Behind her Kakashi gave his student a big thumbs up. We've also come to agree that this position is an equal jonin status in every village a part of the allied shinobi forces and will allow you, if you so chose, to take and lead squads of the forces into battle. Tsunade turned to Kakashi and nodded. The jonin nodded in return and stepped forward towards the teenager with a horned headband similar to his deceased godfather's with the kanji for shinobi carved into it in his left hand and a white Konohan jonin flak jacket with the Uzumaki spiral engraved on the back in his right. Naruto looked at the offered items and then around the room, waiting for the twist. This was all too good to be true, a way to come and go as he pleased with no questions asked and stopping the shinobi from trying to catch him. Well, Naruto, Tsunade said, making him look right at her. Do you accept the status as the first Sannin of the allied shinobi forces? Will I be forced to fight in the war? Naruto asked, looking at the Godame Hokage. She shook her head. We've already held a vote over who was your superior and decided that a vote was the only fair way to decide your inclusion. You resigned for Konoha's previous hassling and concern over you declining this offer solidified leaving your inclusion of our war to you, said Tsunade. You have no master, but you represent all of us. If, and this is a big if, said Naruto. If my war is over before yours, I will return to help you. Not because of my duty, or because it is my war, but because it is the right thing to do. With a heavy breath, Naruto looked back at the items offered to him and chuckled. Now I feel a bit underdressed. Oh, you're fine, said Mei with a smile. With a nervous laugh to the Mizuki's comment, Naruto looked back at Tsunade. I accept. Behind him Talia had a frown on her face. She didn't like this place and didn't want Naruto to have something to really tie him down here. Reiko was a different story because if something happened to her parents he could always come and get her somehow. She merely crossed her arms with her brows furrowing as Naruto took the offered gear from his old teacher while the Kages nodded in approval. Talia could tell this was going to make things a lot more difficult later on. That's it for part 13. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.